Three major new developments in the mysterious death of Nolan Wells.
The case just stands you three developments, one unanswered question. Tonight, three new developments are forcing investigators, the Wells family, and the public to take another look at the final hours of Nolan Wells. The first development involves new information about Nolan's condition on Horn Island. According to preliminary information from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, witnesses told investigators that Nolan had been drinking heavily with friends before he disappeared. The second development concerns the most important question in the entire timeline. Was Nolan still on Horn Island after the boat Carrie's friends departed? For weeks, Nolan's friends have maintained that he chose to stay behind. They said he was spending time with a young woman and decided not to return with them when their boat began experiencing mechanical trouble. But now, TMZ reports that sources with direct knowledge of the investigation claim at least two witnesses told law enforcement they saw Nolan on the island after the boat left. Those claims have not been independently verified, and authorities have not publicly confirmed them. Still, if accurate, they could be significant because they would support the basic outline of the friend's account. Nolan may not have boarded the boat at all. And the third development involves a distress call made from that boat. The longer version of the recording has now been released. It captures a frantic call to sea tow, with a teenager reporting that the boat's bilge pump had stopped working and that the vessel was taking on water. The family later hired experts to examine the audio, while online listeners and media outlets focused on possible background phrases that some believed sounded like, "Is he dead?" "Check his chest," or "Nolan, wake up." But when a digital forensics expert compared the original and enhanced versions, he said those phrases could not be reliably confirmed. So tonight, we are going to separate the three developments from the speculation surrounding them. What is actually new? What does the evidence establish? And what remains completely unknown about Nolan Wells' final hours? Development 1. What happened before Nolan disappeared? To understand why the drinking reports matter, we have to return to July 4th on Horn Island. Nolan Wells, an 18-year-old college student and football player from Mississippi, traveled to Horn Island with friends during the holiday weekend. Horn Island is a remote barrier island along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It is surrounded by open water, changing tides, boats, currents, and large groups of people who often gather there during holiday celebrations. Nolan was not alone on the island. There were boats in the area. Groups of young people were socializing. Some were standing in the water. Others were moving between boats or gathering near the shoreline. The location was not necessarily empty or isolated in the way many viewers initially imagined. That detail matters because the public discussion surrounding Nolan's disappearance has often focused on the idea that he was left behind on an abandoned island. Development is not proof of what happened to Nolan. It does not tell us whether he drowned, suffered an accident, became disoriented, or encountered another person. What it does is provide context. According to a preliminary document obtained by ABC News, witnesses told investigators that Nolan had been drinking heavily with friends on Horn Island. The same document reportedly states that several friends who traveled to the island with Nolan told authorities that, when they left, he was an unknown female and had chosen to remain on the island. That distinction is important. There is a difference between saying that Nolan was drinking and saying that alcohol causes death. There is a difference between saying that Nolan stayed behind and saying that someone harmed him. And there is a difference between saying that witnesses saw him after the boat departed and proving exactly where he went next. At this stage, those facts must remain separate. The last confirmed movements. The known timeline centers around the afternoon departure of Nolan's friends. According to statements attributed to the group, the boat began taking on water. The bilge pump reportedly stopped working, creating concern that the vessel could sink or become disabled. The people on board then contacted a towing service. That distress call is now one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in the case. At the time the call was made, Nolan's friends say he was not on the boat. They have said he had been asked more than once to return with them, but chose to remain on the island. If that account is accurate, Nolan made a decision to stay behind while the others left because the boat was experiencing trouble. But the word decision carries a limitation. Even if Nolan voluntarily remained on the island, that does not tell us what happened afterward. It only establishes a starting point for the missing portion of the timeline. That missing portion could include several possibilities. Nolan may have remained near the group of boats. He may have attempted to find another ride back to the mainland. He may have walked to another part of the island. He may have entered the water. He may have become separated from the people around him. Or he may have encountered circumstances that investigators have not yet publicly described. At this time, the available evidence does not allow us to choose one explanation with confidence. That is why the reports of possible witnesses are so important. 2 possible witnesses. TMZ has reported that at least 2 witnesses told law enforcement they saw Nolan on Horn Island after the boat carrying his friends departed. Again, this has not been independently verified. Authorities have not publicly confirmed the identities of those witnesses or released their statements. But consider why the claim matters. If investigators can establish that Nolan was seen after departure, they may be able to narrow the timeline. They may also be able to determine what Nolan was wearing, who he was with, which direction he was traveling, and whether he appeared intoxicated, injured, distressed, or otherwise unusual. Even a short observation could become important if it can be connected to a photograph, video, phone location, boat GPS record, or another independent source. For example, an eyewitness might remember seeing Nolan at a certain time. That memory alone could be imperfect, but if a nearby photograph was taken moments later and the original file contains reliable metadata, the 2 pieces of information may reinforce each other. That is how investigators build timelines, not through one dramatic claim, but through multiple pieces of evidence that either support or contradict one another. A witness may remember a time incorrectly. A video may have been uploaded later than it was recorded. A screenshot may display the time it was captured rather than the time the original image was taken. A social media post may be created after the event while describing something that happened earlier. And an enhanced audio recording may cause listeners to hear words that are not actually present. That is why the identity of the witnesses is not enough. Their statements must be tested. Were they actually on Horn Island? Could they see Nolan clearly? Did they know him personally? What time did they believe they saw him? Did they tell anyone else immediately? Do their accounts match physical evidence? And were their statements made before or after the case became widely discussed online? Those questions do not mean the witnesses are lying. They are standard questions in any investigation involving uncertain timelines. Why alcohol reports matter, and why they do not solve the case. The reported drinking information has already triggered strong reactions. Some people see it as a possible explanation for an accident. Others worried that it could be used to unfairly blame Nolan for what happened to him. Both reactions require caution. Alcohol can be relevant to an investigation because it may affect balance, judgment, memory, decision-making, and a person's ability to respond to changing conditions in the water. But the presence of alcohol does not automatically explain a death. The amount consumed, the timing of consumption, Nolan's physical condition, the water conditions, the weather, the current, and the medical findings would all matter. That is where toxicology becomes important. However, the public has not been given the complete medical findings. Reporting has indicated that the autopsy and toxicology results were sent to the Jackson County District Attorney's Office, while the findings remained unavailable to the public as the investigation continued. Without those results, it would be irresponsible to make a definitive statement about Nolan's level of intoxication at the time of death. The preliminary witness information may establish that drinking occurred earlier in the day. It does not necessarily establish how much Nolan consumed, when he last drank, or what his condition was when he was last seen. That is the line between evidence and assumption. The first major question is not simply whether Nolan had been drinking. The deeper question is this: what was Nolan's physical and mental condition during the final confirmed moments when witnesses saw him? Was he walking normally? Was he communicating clearly? Was he still with the young woman mentioned by his friends? Was he near the shoreline or farther inland? Did he appear to be trying to leave? Did anyone observe an argument? Did anyone see him enter the water? Did anyone notice him with another group? And after the friend's boat departed, who was the last person to see no one alive? Those answers could determine whether this was primarily a boating accident, a drowning scenario, an unexplained disappearance, or something that requires a different investigative theory. At the moment, The first development gives investigators additional context, but it does not close the gap. It widens a number of questions. What Development 1 actually establishes, based on the currently available information. Development 1 establishes 4 limited points. First, witnesses reportedly told investigators that Nolan had been drinking heavily with friends on Horn Island. Second, friends reportedly told authorities that Nolan chose to remain on the island while they left because their boat was taking on water. Third, the drinking information does not independently prove intoxication at the time Nolan disappeared. And fourth, none of these details establishes a cause or manner of Nolan's death. The facts may eventually become part of a larger timeline. They may be supported by toxicology eyewitness accounts, phone data, photographs, GPS information, or video evidence. But until those pieces are assembled, this development should be viewed as context, not a conclusion. And while the first development concerns Nolan's condition before he disappeared, the second development may address the most important disputed point in the entire case. Was Nolan actually seen on Horn Island after his friend's boat pulled away? That is where the timeline begins to change. Production note: Development 2. The reported witnesses who may have seen Nolan on Horn Island after the departure of his friend's boat, including the reliability questions surrounding those accounts and the gap between the last confirmed sighting and the later discovery of his body. Current reporting confirms that investigators have sought first-hand photos, videos, and eyewitness accounts from people present near Horn Island on July 4th. While the investigation remains ongoing with the witnesses who may have seen Nolan after the boat left. The timeline's most important gap. The second major development in the Nolan Wells case involves a claim that could either strengthen the existing timeline or create an entirely new set of questions. According to reports, at least 2 witnesses told law enforcement that they saw Nolan on Horn Island after the boat, carrying his friends departed. That claim has not been independently verified. Authorities have not publicly confirmed the identities of those witnesses, and the complete statements have not been released. But if those witnesses are credible, their accounts could be important because they would place Nolan alive on the island after the departure of the boat he arrived on. That is the central issue. Not whether Nolan had been drinking, not whether the boat experienced mechanical trouble, not whether people were gathered around other vessels. The key issue is what happened during the period after Nolan's friends left and before he was reported missing. Public reporting has placed the boat's departure from Horn Island at approximately 4:31 p.m. GPS data, obtained from a Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, reportedly tracked the vessel from its morning departure to its return to the mainland. Other reports have stated that Nolan was last seen sometime around 3 p.m., while some later accounts have focused on a final sighting closer to the boat's departure. Those differences may seem small, but in a missing person investigation, a difference of 30 minutes can change everything. What does seen after departure really mean? When people hear that witnesses saw Nolan after the boat left, they may assume the claim answers the biggest question. It does not. A sighting after departure would tell investigators that Nolan was likely not on the departing boat, but it would not automatically tell them where he was headed, who he was with, or what happened next. The witness could have seen Nolan near the water. They could have seen him walking along the beach. They could have seen him near another boat. They could have seen him speaking with someone. Or they may have seen someone they believed was Nolan from a distance. Each possibility has a different investigative value. That is why investigators must examine the details behind the statement. How far away was a witness? What was the lighting like? Was the witness sober? Did the witness know Nolan personally? What clothing was Nolan wearing? Was the person's face visible? How long did the witness observe him? Did Nolan say anything? Did the witness tell law enforcement before hearing the public narrative, or only after the case became national news? These questions do not automatically discredit the account. They determine how much weight the account should receive. A witness who knew Nolan personally and saw him clearly at close range may provide a strong identification. A person who noticed someone from a distance for only a few seconds may provide a lead, but not a confirmed fact. The original account from Nolan's friends. Nolan's friends have repeatedly said that he chose to remain on the island. According to the account described in interviews, Nolan was with a young woman when the group prepared to leave, when the boat began taking on water. Someone reportedly called out to Nolan and urged him to come aboard. The account says Nolan declined. He allegedly said he would return with someone else. That detail has been central to the public understanding of the case because it suggests Nolan was not accidentally forgotten or unknowingly left behind. Instead, it suggests that he made a conscious choice to remain on Horn Island. But a conscious decision to stay does not mean the decision was safe. If Nolan had been drinking heavily, as preliminary witness information reportedly indicated, his judgment may have been affected. Again, that remains a possibility, not a conclusion. There are also other questions. Was another boat expected to take Nolan back? Did Nolan actually have a confirmed ride? Was he still with the young woman when his friends departed? Did the friends know where he intended to go? Did anyone else hear the conversation? And if he said he would return with someone else, who was that person? The more closely investigators examine the decision to stay, the more important the surrounding witnesses become. Why the young woman matters. The young woman mentioned in the accounts has become one of the most discussed figures in the public timeline, but her presence alone does not establish anything criminal. She may have been the last person known to be with Nolan. She may have spoken with investigators. She may have information about his mood, his physical condition, and his plans. Or she may have left the area before Nolan disappeared. At this stage, the public does not have a complete, verified account of her interaction with Nolan. That uncertainty has encouraged online speculation. But speculation cannot replace evidence. The responsible questions are straightforward. When did she last see Nolan? Was she with him when the boat left? Did she see him walk toward the water? Did she know whether he had another ride? Did she notice him acting confused or distressed? Did she tell anyone where he was going? And did other people do the same interaction? If at least 2 independent witnesses saw Nolan afterward, their statements may help confirm the broad timeline. If both witnesses were repeating the same online rumor, their accounts would carry much less value. Investigators will need to determine whether the witnesses independently observed the same event or whether one account influenced the other. The difference between a lead and confirmation. This case has generated a large amount of information from social media, independent researchers, media outlets, and members of the public. Some of that information may be useful. Some may be incomplete. Some may be wrong. And some may be impossible to verify because the original file, recording, timestamp, or source is missing. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has publicly requested original, unedited photos and videos from people who were on or near Horn Island on July 4th. The request specifically included material showing Nolan, alleged altercations, unusual activity, or the northwest area of the island. That request tells us something important. Investigators are not simply looking for opinions about the case. They are looking for original evidence. An original photograph may contain metadata that a screenshot does not. An unedited video may show what happened before and after the moment that was uploaded online. A phone may preserve location information that was not visible to the public. A witness may remember a conversation differently after watching television coverage, but an early text message may show what the person said shortly after the event. This is why the timing of witness statements matters. A person who came forward immediately may have a different evidentiary value from a person who waited weeks and then describe an event using language already circulating online. Neither person should automatically be dismissed, but both accounts must be examined carefully. The boat's GPS data. The boat's GPS data provides a framework for the timeline. According to reporting based on Mississippi Department of Marine Resources records, the boat departed the mainland at approximately 9:56 a.m. on July 4th and arrived at Horn Island around 11:14 a.m. It remained in the area for several hours before departing at approximately 4:31 p.m. The same reporting indicates that the vessel eventually returned to the mainland later that afternoon. GPS can show where a vessel was located and when it moved, but GPS cannot automatically show where every passenger was. It cannot prove who was standing on the beach. It cannot show whether Nolan entered another boat. It cannot establish what happened inside the group before departure. And it cannot explain why Nolan was not on the vessel when it left. That is why investigators need to combine GPS with other evidence. The boat's movement should be compared against the sea towed distress call, original photographs and videos, phone location records, witness statements, boat registration and passenger information, weather and tide data. any available surveillance footage, medical and toxicology findings. One source can establish movement, another can establish identity, a third can establish timing. Only when those sources overlap can investigators build a reliable minute-by-minute timeline, a possible new timeline. If the witness reports are accurate, the timeline may look something like this. Nolan arrives at Horn Island with friends during the late morning. Throughout the afternoon, people gather around boats and socialize. Nolan is seen with friends and possibly drinking. At some point, Nolan is observed with a young woman. The boat carrying Nolan's friends begins experiencing mechanical trouble and taking on water. The group prepares to leave. Nolan is asked to return with them, but remains on the island. The boat departs at approximately 4:31 p.m. At least 2 witnesses reportedly see Nolan on the island after that departure. Later, concern grows because Nolan is not returned. A missing person report is eventually made. His body is found on or near Horn Island 2 days later. That outline may appear simple, but it still contains a critical gap. What happened between the alleged post-departure sighting and the moment Nolan was no longer found? Was he still on the island? Did he enter the water? Did he board another vessel? Did he move to a different section of the island? Was he injured? Did anyone try to help him? And if someone did see him afterward, why did no one immediately recognize the importance of that sighting? The 3 p.m. problem, one of the most important conflicts in the public timeline, concerns the time of Nolan's last known sighting. Some reports have placed the last sighting at approximately 3 p.m. Other accounts have highlighted video or photograph from later in the afternoon. One report identified a 2:23 p.m. recording as potentially the last known image or video of Nolan. That inconsistency does not necessarily mean someone is lying. It may reflect the difference between the last confirmed image, the last personal sighting, the last time someone spoke with Nolan, the last time his friends believed they saw him, the last time investigators could independently confirm his location. These are not always the same moment. A person may be photographed at 2:23 p.m. but seen by a witness at 3 p.m. A witness may estimate the time incorrectly. A video may be uploaded later than it was recorded. A phone may show a timestamp in a different time zone or reflect a screenshot rather than the original file. This is why investigators need original evidence. If a witness claims, "I've seen Nolan after 4:31 p.m., the statement could become one of the most important pieces of information in a case, but only after it is tested against the rest of the record. What the witness reports do not prove. The reported witness accounts do not prove that Nolan was murdered. They do not prove that he was with the young woman when the boat departed. They do not prove that he entered another boat. They do not prove that anyone on the island saw him drown. And they do not prove that the people around him knew he was in danger. What they may do is narrow the range of possibilities. If Nolan was seen alive after his friends left, investigators can focus on his movements during that later period. They can identify every boat that remained near the area. They can determine who owned those boats and who was aboard them. They can ask whether any passengers photographed the shoreline or the water. They can compare witness statements with digital records. They can examine whether Nolan's phone, keys, or personal belongings were left behind. And they can determine whether the location where his body was found is consistent with the water conditions and the timeline. The second major question is this: who is the last verified person to see Nolan alive? Not the last person who believes they saw him. Not the last person whose story became popular online. The last person whose account can be independently supported. That person may be one of Nolan's friends. It may be the young woman he was reportedly with. It may be an unrelated witness who happened to be nearby. Or maybe someone whose photograph or video has not yet been publicly identified. Finding that person is essential, because once investigators establish a last verified sighting, they can work forward instead of backward. They can reconstruct Nolan's direction of travel, identify possible witnesses, examine nearby boats, and determine whether his disappearance occurred on land or in the water. The reported post-departure witnesses could be the key to that process. But until their statements are confirmed, they remain leads, not final answers, where the case stands. At this point, the evidence suggests a narrow but unresolved timeline. Nolan traveled to Horn Island with friends. He spent a day in an environment where alcohol, boats, changing water depth, and large groups of people were present. His friend's boat developed trouble and departed without him. Reports indicate that Nolan may have remained on the island, possibly with a young woman. Preliminary information indicates that witnesses described heavy drinking, and now, sources reportedly claim that at least 2 people saw Nolan after the boat departed. Each detail may be important, but none of them, standing alone, explains how Nolan died. The investigation still needs to answer the question that has remained at the center of this case. What happened to Nolan after the boat carrying his friends disappear from view? And that question leads directly to the third development. The distress call that may reveal what was happening aboard the boat at the exact moment Nolan's friends were trying to leave. The distress call and the voices in the background, a recording from the water. The third major development in the Nolan Wells case is an audio recording made during the boat's return from Horn Island. At first, the recording appeared to document a mechanical emergency. A teenager contacted a towing service and reported that the boat's bilge pump had stopped working. He said the boat was taking on water and asked for assistance. The call began with a direct statement. "We're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can you all please come?" The dispatcher then asked questions about the vessel, its location, and the condition of the people aboard. The caller reportedly confirmed that everyone was on the boat and in good health. That sentence has become one of the most important details in the recording. Everybody is on board. If no one was not on the boat, as his friends have consistently said, then the statement may simply mean that everyone who was aboard the vessel was accounted for. But because Nolan later disappeared and was found dead, listeners have naturally questioned what was happening in the background. Was the call only about a mechanical emergency? Or did the voices behind the caller reveal another emergency that the dispatcher did not understand? The original recording, in the original version, the caller sounds very and rushed. He explains that the bilge pump has stopped working. The boat is taking on water. The group needs help. The dispatcher remains focused on the normal questions a towing operator would ask. Where are you? How far is the water coming up? What does the boat look like? How many people are aboard? Are the passengers safe? These questions are routine during a maritime emergency. The caller's answers are not always easy to hear. There is background noise, overlapping speech, movement, and what sounds like confusion among the people on the vessel. But the original audio does not clearly identify Nolan. It does not clearly establish that Nolan was on the boat, and it does not clearly establish that any passenger had been injured. That is where the enhanced version entered the story, the enhanced audio. TMZ later obtained a recording and released an enhanced version. The enhancement attempted to make the voices and background conversation easier to hear. Once the audio was circulated online, listeners began focusing on several possible phrases. Some people believed they heard, "Is he dead?" Others believed they heard, "Check his chest." And some thought they heard Nolan's name followed by words resembling "wake up." Those interpretations immediately changed the emotional meaning of the recording. A mechanical problem is one thing. A boat taking on water is serious, but it is still a recognizable emergency. A possible medical crisis, or a person who may already be dead, will be something entirely different. The enhanced audio created the impression that the people on the boat may have been dealing with more than a failed bilge pump, but impressions are not proof. An unclear recording can be affected by background noise, compression, distance from the microphone, wind, overlapping voices, radio interference, and the way the audio was edited or enhanced. The listener's expectation can also influence what they think they hear. Once someone says, "Listen for the words, 'Is he dead?' the brain begins searching for that exact phrase. A sound that might otherwise be meaningless can suddenly appear to resemble familiar words. That phenomenon is one reason forensic audio analysis must be performed carefully. What the digital forensic expert found. Robert Fried, a digital forensics expert who has analyzed electronic evidence for more than 2 decades, reviewed versions of recording. His analysis reportedly found that the versions were not identical. One was approximately 8.5 minutes long, while the other was approximately 8 minutes and 50 seconds. Investigators also calculated digital fingerprint values, known as MD5 hash values, and found that the files contained different content. that does not automatically mean the enhanced recording was manipulated in a criminal sense. It may mean that portions were removed, redacted, processed, or presented in a different format, but it does mean the two files should not be treated as if they're the same recording. A forensic analyst wants to know where the file came from. Who created it? Was it copied from the original? Was it edited? Was background noise removed? Were certain sections amplified? Were portions muted? Did the file retain its original metadata? And is there a complete, unaltered version stored by the agency that received the call? According to Fried, the alleged phrases highlighted online could not be reliably confirmed through his review. He said the audio was distorted and that his transcription analysis did not identify a wording resembling, "Is he dead? Check his chest," or "Nolan, wake up." That finding does not prove that nothing unusual was said. It means the recording cannot reliably establish those words based on the versions reviewed. Those are two very different conclusions. Why the original file matters. When audio becomes evidence, the original source is critical. A file downloaded from a website may not preserve the original recording. It may have been converted into another format. It may have been compressed. It may include redaction to protect phone numbers, account information, or private details. It may have been trimmed for broadcast. It may have been enhanced to improve clarity. Every one of those steps can affect what listeners hear. That is why investigators would want the original recording directly from the organization that received the call. They would also want any associated records. The dispatch log, the incoming phone number, the exact call time, the original digital file, the system used to record the call, metadata associated with the file, any communication between the dispatcher and the towing company, the location of the boat when the call was made, the names of the people listed as passengers. The audio file alone may answer only part of the question. The dispatch records could establish when the call began. GPS data could establish where the vessel was located. The phone record could identify the caller. And witness statements could explain what was happening aboard the boat while the call was in progress. What the call confirms. Even without the disputed background phrases, the call appears to confirm several important facts. First, the boat was experiencing a mechanical problem. Second, the bilge pump was reportedly not functioning. Third, the caller believed the boat was taking on water. Fourth, the group needed assistance from the west tip of Horn Island. Fifth, the call occurred during the same general period when Nolan's friends said they were leaving the island. The recording is therefore consistent with the friends' explanation that the boat was in trouble and that they had a reason to depart quickly. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources GPS data reportedly shows the boat arriving at Horn Island at approximately 11:14 a.m. and leaving at approximately 4:31 p.m. The vessel later traveled toward Fort Bayou and eventually returned to the area where it had launched. The distress call does not, by itself, establish what Nolan was doing on shore. It does not show whether he had already left the area. It does not prove that he entered the water, and it does not identify the last person who saw him alive. The timing of the call. The timing creates another question. Public accounts have placed Nolan's last known sighting around 3 p.m. The distress call reportedly came around 4 p.m. The boat departed at approximately 4:31 p.m. That suggests there may have been roughly an hour between the last reported sighting and the boat's departure. During that hour, the group may have been preparing to leave, dealing with a mechanical problem, attempting to contact Nolan, and trying to keep the vessel from taking on more water. The exact sequence matters. Was Nolan asked aboard before the distress call? Was he asked after the call? Did the group know the boat was in danger when they first called for him? Did the worsening emergency change the way they communicated with him? Did anyone physically walk toward Nolan? Did anyone record video during this period? Was another boat nearby and able to take Nolan? And if Nolan said he would return with someone else, was that person identified? The answers could determine whether the departure was orderly, rushed, confused, or something else entirely. Could the background voices be important? Even if the disputed phrases cannot be confirmed, the background audio may still contain useful information. Investigators could examine whether the voices represent the boat operator, passengers responding to the dispatcher, people shouting directions, someone discussing a mechanical problem, someone talking about another boat, a person using Nolan's name, a passenger who is injured or frightened, a conversation unrelated to Nolan, but the recording must be interpreted in context. A person saying check to checks could refer to a life jacket, a storage compartment, or something entirely unrelated. A phrase that sounds like wake up could be another word distorted by the recording. A person saying is he dead would be important, but only if the phrase can be reliably identified and understood in context. The question is not what a group of listeners believes they hear. The question is what can be scientifically supported. Audio enhancement is not a time machine. An enhancement cannot recover information that was never captured. It may make an existing voice louder. It may reduce some background noise. It may isolate certain frequencies. But enhancement cannot guarantee that a faint or distorted sound will become an accurate sentence. In some cases, aggressive processing can create artifacts or distortions that make the recording appear more understandable than it actually is. That is why forensic analysts generally compare the original recording, a preserved forensic copy, the edited or enhanced version, the frequency spectrum, the file's metadata, the transcript created independently by multiple analysts, the context of the conversation. If several analysts independently hear the same phrase, confidence may increase. If different analysts hear different words, the phrase should be treated as uncertain. In this case, the expert review described in public reporting did not corroborate the dramatic words highlighted online. That does not make the reporting meaningless. It simply means the recording has limits. The phrase, everybody is on board. The phrase, everybody is on board, deserves careful attention. The dispatcher asked whether everyone on the vessel was safe. The caller answered that everyone on board was okay. If no one was not aboard, the answer would not necessarily be deceptive. The caller may have been answering literally about the people physically on the boat, but the phrase also creates a question about the caller's understanding. Did the dispatcher know that Nolan was supposed to be part of the original group? Did the caller believe everyone who was supposed to leave had boarded? Was the caller aware that no one intended to stay? Was the caller answering quickly because the boat was sinking? The wording must be evaluated alongside the other evidence. It should not be treated as proof that no one was aboard. It should not be treated as proof that the caller knew something about no one's condition. It is one statement in an emergency call, and its meaning depends on the questions that came immediately before and after it. A recording that supports one account but leaves another untouched. The distress call appears to support the idea that the boat had a legitimate mechanical emergency. That is important because it explains why Nolan's friends may have felt they needed to leave the island. But the recording does not resolve the central mystery. It does not tell us whether Nolan was still alive when the boat left. It does not tell us whether he was injured. It does not tell us whether another person remained with him. And it does not tell us whether his disappearance was accidental or caused by another person. The most responsible interpretation is limited. The call documents a boat emergency. The background voices are difficult to interpret. The enhanced audio has produced allegations that have not been independently confirmed. And the available forensic review did not verify the most dramatic phrases attributed to the recording. The third major question is this. What exactly was happening aboard the boat during the distress call? And can the original recording answer it? Investigators may already have more information than the public does. They may know the identity of every voice. They may have interviewed everyone who was aboard. They may have examined the original recording and related dispatch materials. They may have matched a call to GPS data and phone records. Or they may still be working to obtain that information. The public cannot assume that silence means investigators have done nothing. But the public also cannot treat online audio interpretations as official findings. The recording has raised questions. It has not answered them. The three developments together. When the three new developments are viewed together, they create a more detailed, but not necessarily more conclusive, picture. The first development suggests Nolan had been drinking heavily before he disappeared. The second suggests witnesses may have seen him on Horn Island after his friend's boat left. The third provides a recording showing that the boat was in trouble during the departure period, while disputed background phrases remain unverified. Together, these developments may support the basic timeline offered by Nolan's friends. they may also reveal how much is still unknown. Nolan may have remained on the island. His friends may have left because the boat was taking on water. People may have seen him afterward, and the distress call may simply document the emergency that caused the group to depart. But until the witnesses are identified, the original audio is examined, and the full medical findings are released, the case remains unresolved. The final question is still the same. What happened to Nolan Wells after he was left behind on Horn Island? We will examine the digital evidence that can help investigators reconstruct his final movements, including phone data, GPS records, social media accounts, and the preservation of information that may otherwise disappear forever. The digital trail that to rebuild Nolan's final egoized evidence that does not forget. When a person disappears, investigators often begin with the physical scene. They examine the location. They speak with witnesses. They search the surrounding area. They document boats, vehicles, clothing, personal belongings, and the condition of the water. But in a modern investigation, the physical scene is only part of the story. The other part may exist inside phones, GPS devices, social media applications, photographs, videos, cellular records, and digital accounts. Those records can show where people were, when they moved, who they contacted, and what they were doing before and after an event. In the Nolan Wells case, digital evidence could be especially important because a timeline depends on a series of short and uncertain moments. When exactly did Nolan separate from his friends? Was he still near the boats? Did he contact anyone? Did anyone try to contact him? Did his phone move after the boat departed? Did a photograph capture him after the last confirmed sighting? And did any person's phone show movement that matched a possible meeting with Nolan? The answers may not come from one device. They may come from the combined digital records of everyone who is present, the GPS timeline. The most important digital evidence currently discussed in public reporting is the GPS data for the boat that carried Nolan to Horn Island. According to records obtained from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the boat left a private launch at approximately 9:56 a.m. on July 4th. It arrived near the western tip of Horn Island at approximately 11:14 a.m. The vessel remained in the area for several hours before beginning its departure at approximately 4:30 or 4:31 p.m. The boat eventually returned to the mainland at approximately 5:44 p.m. That creates a 74-minute period between the departure from Horn Island and the return to the mainland. During that period, the boat experienced mechanical trouble, contacted a towing service, and was eventually moved or towed before returning to shore. The GPS track gives investigators a map, but a map is not a complete story. GPS can show the vessel's position. It cannot automatically show who was standing on the beach when the boat left. It cannot show where Nolan was. It cannot establish whether he entered another vessel. It cannot reveal what passengers were saying. And it cannot tell investigators whether a person on the island was injured, confused, or in danger. The GPS record is therefore a foundation, not a final answer. The route after Horn Island. Reports based on the GPS data indicate that the boat did not simply leave Horn Island and return directly to an original launch point. After departing the island, the vessel traveled to a route connected to mechanical emergency. It reportedly moved toward Fort Bayou, where it made additional stops before eventually returning to the launch area. That route is important because it may help investigators understand the timing of the distress call and the vessel's condition. Was the boat moving under its own power? Was it being towed? When did the boat regain speed? Where did the passengers disembark? How long did the group remain together? And did anyone discuss Nolan during the period between the island and the mainland? The answers may exist in the towing company's records. A dispatch log could show the exact time the call was received. A tow operator may remember how many people were aboard. The company may have records of the vessel's location. There may also be radio traffic, payment information, text messages, or photographs taken during the response. Even a simple question, who stepped off the boat when it returned, could become important. The missing 74 minutes. The phrase 74 minutes has become powerful because it creates a measurable block of time. At approximately 4:30 p.m., the boat leaves Horn Island. At approximately 5:44 p.m., it returns to the mainland. Nolan is not on board when it returns. That does not mean the 74 minutes contain the answer to Nolan's death. but it does mean the boat's movements during that period can be reconstructed with greater precision than many other parts of the timeline. Investigators can compare the GPS position of the boat, the start and end of the distress call, the time a tow operator arrived, the speed of the vessel, the direction of travel, the location of any nearby boats, the phone locations of the passengers, messages exchanged during the emergency. If the GPS shows the boat was far from Horn Island during the entire period, that may help establish that Nolan was left behind. If the boat returned toward the island, even briefly, that movement would need to be explained. Public reporting has indicated that the GPS data did not show the vessel returning to Horn Island that night, although it traveled through other waterways before reaching the mainland. That information may support the friend's account that Nolan did not return with them, but it still does not prove what happened to Nolan after they left. Phone location data. The next major category of evidence is phone data. Nolan's phone could potentially reveal its last known location, the last time it connected to a cell tower, whether it moved after the boat departed, whether it connected to Wi-Fi, whether location services were active, whether applications recorded movement, whether photographs were taken, whether messages were sent or received, whether the device was powered off, damaged, or submerged. The phones belonging to other people may be equally important. A witness might say they left Horn Island at 4:30 p.m., but if their location history places them elsewhere, investigators would need to understand why. A person might say they never returned to the island. A boat GPS record or phone location could support or contradict that statement. A witness might say they were not near Nolan after departure. A photograph, Bluetooth connection, or cellular record could provide additional information. Digital evidence does not always prove what a person was thinking, but it can challenge a timeline. Social media and private messages. Nolan's family has sought information from several technology companies, including records connected to social media and location services. Those requests reportedly involve platforms such as Meta, Snapchat, TikTok, and Life 360. The purpose was to obtain messages, photos, location information, login records, and other digital evidence that might clarify Nolan's final movements. The value of that evidence depends on what the companies still retain and what investigators are legally able to obtain. Some platforms store information on their servers. Some preserve only limited records. Some applications are designed to delete messages or make them difficult to recover. Some data may exist only on a device, and some records may be lost if they were not preserved quickly. A subpoena or search warrant may obtain account information, verified email addresses, login history, IP addresses, or location records, but that does not guarantee investigators will receive the actual content of every message. The contents may have been deleted. The account may be protected by encryption. The data may have expired under the company's retention policy, or the requested information may not exist in the form investigators expect. Why preservation notices matter. A preservation notice is not proof that someone deleted evidence. It is a warning not to delete or alter potentially relevant records. In an investigation like this, preservation notices may be sent to individuals, companies, or organizations that possess information related to Nolan's movements. That information could include text messages, social media conversations, photographs, videos, cloud storage, GPS records, and communications with investigators. The purpose is to prevent evidence from disappearing while lawyers determine whether it can legally be obtained. But digital evidence is fragile. Everyday actions can change it. Opening an application may update information. Deleting a message may remove data from one device. A phone update may change the way records are stored. Another person logging into an account may alter activity records. That is why investigators generally want preserved devices in their original condition and document every step taken with them. The problem of deleted information. If a message is deleted, can it be recovered? Sometimes, but not always. Recovery depends on the device, operating system, application, backup system, encryption, and amount of time that has passed. Some applications preserve data on a server for a period of time. Some store it locally on a phone. Some provide cloud backups. Some are designed so that messages disappear after being viewed. A forensic extraction may reveal that a message existed when it was deleted or which account accessed it. But even that depends on what remains available. The absence of message is not automatically proof that it was intentionally deleted. The message may have expired. The user may have deleted it routinely. The application may not have retained it, or the phone may have been damaged. Investigators therefore look for patterns. Was a single message removed, or was an entire conversation deleted? Did deletion occur shortly after Nolan disappeared? Did multiple people delete related material? Were accounts accessed from unusual locations? Did a person change devices? Did someone attempt to reset a password? Again, none of these actions automatically proves a crime. They are clues that require context. Mapping the digital evidence. A digital forensic analyst would likely build a combined timeline. The first layer would be the boat's GPS data. The second layer would be the distress call. The third layer would be cell tower and phone location records. The fourth layer would be photographs and videos. The fifth layer would be messages and social media posts. The sixth layer would be witness interviews. Each layer could be compared against the others. For example, if a photograph is said to have been taken at 4:20 p.m., investigators could check whether the photographer's phone was actually on Horn Island at that time. If a witness says Nolan was standing near a specific boat, investigators could check whether that boat was present according to GPS or photographs. If someone claims Nolan was on the island after 4:30 p.m., investigators could examine whether their phone was near the same location. If a message says, "We are leaving now," investigators who compare the message timestamp with the vessel's recorded departure. The goal is not to create an exciting theory. The goal is to determine which pieces of information agree. The limits of location data. Location data is powerful, but it is not perfect. A cell tower may cover a large area. GPS accuracy can change depending on the device, satellite visibility, weather, and surrounding geography. A location application may report the time an entry was uploaded rather than the exact time the person moved. A phone may be left inside a boat while the owner walks away. A device may lose signal. A person may carry someone else's phone, and an application may be disabled or configured not to record location. That is why location records should not be treated as a continuous movie of a person's movements. They are individual points in a larger timeline. Investigators must determine what each point actually represents. The question of Nolan's phone. One of the most important unanswered issues is what happened to Nolan's phone. Was it recovered? Was it located near the body? Was it found on the island? Did the device connect to a network after Nolan was last seen? Did it continue moving? Was the battery charged? Were messages sent from it? Was the phone damaged by water? And did anyone else have access to it? The answers can help establish whether Nolan remained on the island, entered the water, or moved somewhere else. But the public has not been given every detail about the phone's condition or the forensic examination. That means online claims about the device should be treated cautiously. What digital evidence could reveal? In the best-case scenario, investigators could use digital records to identify a sequence such as Nolan is photographed at a known location. His phone connects to a nearby network. A message confirms his plans. The boat's GPS shows his friends departing. A witness records Nolan near the shoreline. Another device captures movement in the same area. The phone stops transmitting or moves toward the water. The body is later discovered in a location consistent with the currents. That type of overlap would be powerful, but investigators may also find contradictions. A witness may be wrong about the time. A video may have an unreliable timestamp. The phone may show no movement. A boat may appear on a photograph but not in the GPS record. Contradictions are not always evidence of wrongdoing. They may reflect technical problems, memory errors, or incomplete data. Still, contradictions are exactly what investigators must examine. The digital evidence does not replace the witnesses. Technology can narrow the timeline, but it cannot replace human testimony. A phone may show that someone was on Horn Island. It may not show what that person saw. A photograph may show a boat. It may not show who is inside it. GPS may show a vessel's route. It may not reveal why the passengers made a particular decision. That is why the reported witnesses remain important. Their statements may provide the human details that digital records cannot capture. The strongest case timeline will combine both. A witness account supported by GPS is stronger than either source alone. A photograph supported by metadata is stronger than a screenshot. An audio statement supported by dispatch records is more reliable than an edited clip on social media. The fourth major question is this: can Nolan's digital footprint establish where he was after his friends left? If the answer is yes, investigators may be able to narrow the final stage of the timeline. If his phone remained near the island, that could support one explanation. If it moved toward another boat, that could support another. If it stopped transmitting before the boat departed, that would raise additional questions. If another person's device shows a matching movement or communication, investigators may identify someone who can clarify what happened. But until those records are released or confirmed, the public should not fill the gaps with assumptions. Digital evidence may eventually reveal the sequence. It may also show that some of the theories circulating online are impossible. A timeline still under construction. The GPS data gives investigators a departure time. The distress call provides an audio record of the boat's emergency. The reported witnesses may place Nolan on the island afterward. The digital records could connect those events to specific people and locations. But the timeline remains incomplete. The body of Nolan Wells was found on July 6th near the northwestern tip of Horn Island, 2 days after he disappeared during the holiday weekend. The distance between where Nolan was last seen and where his body was found may be affected by tides, wind, currents, and condition the water. That means a final location does not automatically identify the place where Nolan entered the water or how he got there. The water may have moved him, a boat may have moved him, or another sequence of events may have occurred. The public does not yet have enough confirmed evidence to choose between those possibilities. What the digital evidence can do is help investigators distinguish the possible from the impossible, and that distinction may become especially important once the medical findings are released. Because the fifth and final part of this investigation is not only about what happened on Horn Island, it is about what the autopsy and toxicology results may or may not tell us about Nolan Wells' cause of death. What the autopsy does not yet tell, yes, the medical question. The final major question in the Nolan Wells case is also the one that may determine how investigators understand everything else. How did Nolan die? The answer has not been made public. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office completed the official autopsy and toxicology testing, but officials have not released the findings publicly. Reports indicate that the information was sent to the Jackson County District Attorney's Office as the investigation continued. A separate independent autopsy requested by Nolan's family reached a preliminary conclusion of undetermined, pending investigation. The pathologist reported that the available evidence did not allow him to identify a definitive cause or manner of death. That is not the same as saying Nolan was murdered. It is also not the same as saying his death was definitely accidental. It means the medical evidence by itself has not yet answered the question why the independent autopsy was limited. The independent examination reportedly faced several limitations. Because Nolan's body had been in the water, decomposition and exposure affected the examination. The independent pathologist explained that the airway and lungs could not be directly evaluated for water, and the stomach could not be directly examined for its contents. The toxicology results were also not available at the time of that report. Those limitations matter because drowning is not always easy to prove due to a post-mortem examination. Investigators may need to consider the entire case, where the body was found, the condition of the body, the water conditions, the location where Nolan was last seen, whether there were injuries, whether toxicology detected alcohol or other substances, whether witnesses saw him enter the water, whether digital records place him somewhere else, whether another person may have been involved. A medical examiner may be unable to identify a single cause from a body alone. That does not mean nothing can be learned. It means the medical findings must be combined with the investigative evidence. The discoloration on Nolan's head. The independent pathologist reportedly documented an area of red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head near the occipital bone. The report did not establish what caused the discoloration or whether it contributed to his death. This finding has received significant attention because it is located on the head, but a discoloration is not automatically a fatal injury. It can reflect trauma. It could be related to the body's condition after death. It could have resulted from pressure, movement, contact with an object, or exposure to the water. It could also have no connection to the cause of death. The correct medical question is not simply, was there a mark? The question is, what caused it? When did it occur? And did it affect Nolan's ability to survive? Without that information, the finding remains an unresolved detail. It may become important once toxicology, witness accounts, photographs, and a complete official report are reviewed together. What toxicology could reveal? Toxicology may clarify whether alcohol, drugs, medications, or other substances were present in Nolan's system. That information could help investigators evaluate witness reports that he had been drinking heavily. But toxicology has limits too. A positive result would not automatically explain how Nolan died. It would not establish whether he entered the water voluntarily. It would not prove that he was incapable of making decisions. It would not identify who last saw him. And it would not prove that another person caused his death. Toxicology could provide context, but it cannot reconstruct the entire event. Investigators would need to examine the amount detected, the timing of absorption, the condition of the body, and the circumstances surrounding the disappearance. The result must also be interpreted by a qualified forensic pathologist or toxicologist, not by online commentators reading isolated numbers. Why the state report remains important. The official state report may include information that was not available during the independent examination. It may include completed toxicology. It may include additional testing. It may contain photographs, laboratory findings, scene information, or conclusions based on a full investigative record. The state medical examiner may also have access to law enforcement information that are photographs from the scene, evidence collected from boats, information about Nolan's clothing and belongings. That is why the state report may be more informative than the preliminary independent report. But because officials have indicated that the report will remain sealed while the case proceeds, the public does not yet know what it says. Until the results are formally released, any documents circulating online should be treated carefully. False toxicology reports. The investigation has already produced misinformation. Officials have warned that a toxicology report circulating online was fake. Public reporting stated that Mississippi authorities had not released the official results, even though the state autopsy and toxicology process had been completed. That warning is important. A fake document can create false beliefs about alcohol, drugs, injury, or cause of death. It can also damage the reputations of people connected to the investigation. Viewers should be cautious with screenshots, anonymous posts, cropped documents, and claim to begin with phrases like "sources say," but provide no original record. A genuine report should be traceable to an official release, court filing, law enforcement statement, or named professional source. Even then, the report should be read in full. One line removed from context can produce a completely different impression. What the three developments actually change. The title of this documentary promises 3 major new developments. Now it is time to identify exactly what those developments change and what they do not. Development 1, reported heavy drinking. The preliminary information from Mississippi officials reportedly includes witness statements that Nolan had been drinking heavily with friends on Oran Island. This may help investigators understand the condition before he disappeared. It may affect how they examine the possibility of an accident, drowning, disorientation, or impaired judgment, but it does not establish Nolan's exact level of intoxication at the time he entered the water. It does not establish cause of death, and it does not prove that alcohol was responsible for what happened. Development 2, possible witnesses after departure. Reports indicate that at least 2 witnesses may have told law enforcement they saw Nolan on Horn Island after his friend's boat departed. If confirmed, these accounts could support the claim that Nolan remained on the island. They could also help identify his last known location and the people who were nearby. But the witnesses have not been publicly identified, their statements have not been independently verified, and authorities have not publicly confirmed the complete details. For now, this development is a potential timeline lead, not a final conclusion. Development 3, the distress call. The longer distress call confirms that the boat was experiencing a mechanical emergency and taking on water. The recording may help establish when an emergency occurred and how the group communicated while trying to leave the island. However, the most dramatic phrases reportedly heard in an enhanced version have not been reliably confirmed by the digital forensic expert whose analysis was publicly described. The call creates questions. It does not prove that Nolan was aboard. It does not prove that anyone on the boat knew he was injured, and it does not prove foul play. The timeline that still needs to be proven. A responsible timeline must separate confirmed information from reported information. The confirmed framework appears to be: Nolan traveled to Horn Island with friends on July 4th. He spent time on the island during the holiday gathering. His friend's boat later experienced mechanical trouble. The boat departed without Nolan. Nolan was subsequently reported missing. His body was found near Horn Island on July 6th. The remaining details require further verification. Exactly when was Nolan last seen? Who was with him? What was his physical condition? Did he enter another boat? Did he enter the water? Did someone see him after the departure? What time did the boat leave? What time did the distress call begin? What happened during the period after the boat departed? And what do the official autopsy and toxicology reports show? Those questions cannot be answered through one interview, one recording, one photograph, or one online theory. The importance of original evidence. The strongest path forward is original evidence. That means unedited video, full resolution photographs, original audio files, complete GPS records, phone location data, dispatch logs, vote records, passenger lists, unaltered messages, and witness statements collected before memory is influenced by public speculation. The United Cajun Navy has collected photos, screenshots, location information, and other material from members of the public. Reporting has described its work as an effort to organize available information and identify potential witnesses, rather than a final official determination of what happened. That distinction matters. Independent groups can locate evidence and direct investigators toward new leads, but law enforcement must verify the material. They must confirm the source. They must determine whether it was altered. They must establish when it was created, and they must compare it with all other evidence. What the public should not assume. The public should not assume that an unclear audio phrase proves a medical emergency. The public should not assume that drinking proves intoxication at the time of death. The public should not assume that a person who cannot immediately confirm a timeline is guilty of wrongdoing. The public should not assume that a witness account is accurate simply because it supports a preferred theory. And the public should not assume that an inconclusive autopsy proves foul play. At the same time, unanswered questions should not be dismissed. A gap in the timeline is a legitimate reason for investigators to continue asking questions. An unidentified witness may possess important information. An original photograph may change the understanding of the day. A complete phone extraction may confirm or contradict the public narrative. Any official medical findings may eventually clarify whether Nolan drowned, suffered trauma, was affected by substances, or died under circumstances that remain more complicated. The final unanswered question. Nolan Wells went to Horn Island expecting to spend a holiday with friends. At some point, he separated from the group. His friends left without him. A boat emergency created confusion. Witnesses may have seen him after the departure. A distress call captured panic on the water. Digital records may still reveal movements that the public cannot see. And the medical evidence has not yet provided a definitive answer. That is why the cases remain so difficult. There is enough information to create a timeline, but not enough to complete it. There are enough witnesses to identify possible leads, but not enough publicly verified statements to establish exactly what happened. There is enough audio to raise questions, but not enough clarity to confirm the most serious interpretations. And there are enough medical findings to show that the cause of death remains unresolved, but not enough publicly released evidence to determine how Nolan died. A responsible appeal for information. Anyone who was on Horn Island on July 4th and had contact with Nolan should provide investigators with the original information they possess. That includes photographs, videos, messages, location records, and direct observations. People should not edit or enhance the material before turning it over. They should not add captions that imply what happened. They should not identify private individuals online based on speculation, and they should not threaten witnesses, family members, investigators, or anyone connected to the case. The truth will not be found through the loudest accusation. It will be found through evidence that can survive scrutiny. 3 developments have changed the conversation around Nolan Wells' death. The reported drinking information adds context. The reported post-departure witnesses may help fill the timeline, and the distress call provides a real-time record of the boat emergency, even though the background audio remains disputed. But none of those developments, alone or together, tells us exactly how Nolan died. The official autopsy and toxicology results may provide important answers. Digital evidence may reconstruct his final movements. Witnesses may explain what happened after the boat left, and the original audio may reveal more once it is examined in its complete, unedited form. For now, the case remains open, the timeline remains incomplete, and the central question remains unanswered. What happened to Nolan Wells after his friend's boat disappeared from Oran Island? Until that question is answered with verified evidence, every theory must remain a theory, and Nolan's family must continue waiting for the information they've been asking for from beginning. Not rumors, not edited audio, and not internet speculation, but the truth about what happened to their son.